Have you ever thought about how your keyboard works? How does the computer know which key you press and what language you're typing in? Does the computer just know because this is all a simulation?
Well, it all has to do with the keyboard matrix, the key codes, and the input source. But don't take my word for it. Take the red pill and come with me to discover the truth.
Hey, but these are just M&Ms! Hi Dygmates, my name is Dominique, and today I'll guide you through the intricacies of how a keyboard works, how to type in multiple languages, and how a programmable keyboard can help you make that so much easier. Let's start with the basics. How does a keyboard work? When you press a key, your keyboard sends a unique code to your computer. This numerical code is what we call a key code. These key codes indicate positions on your keyboard matrix, but it has nothing to do with the movie. A matrix is just a rectangular array of quantities or expressions in rows and columns. For example, this key, which is Q on an English keyboard or A on a French keyboard, has the key code 14 in the HID keyboard usage, which is the standard for all keyboards. That code allows the computer to know which key was pressed. But how does the computer know if you're using an English or French keyboard? When your computer reads that key code, it translates it to a character based on your selected input language. The input language shouldn't be confused with the OS language. The OS language refers to the language used in an operating system's user interface. The input language, however, is the keyboard layout that your computer uses to interpret the key codes. It's like a translation dictionary that helps your computer display the correct character whenever you press a specific key.
3A, 5B, 37, backspace.
On Windows, the input language is in Settings, Time and Language, and then Language. On Mac, it's in System Preferences, Keyboard, and Input Sources. It's important to remember that your computer will interpret key codes based on the input language you've selected. The legends on the keycaps don't matter. They are just there to remind you of where things are. If you don't know how to touch type, getting a keyboard with legends that match your input language is usually a good idea. Or else you'll be utterly confused.
I'm down to 1 word per minute, and that word is perflictus-clap.
Typing in different languages is as easy as changing the input source. You can add as many as you want in your system preferences and cycle through them by pressing Windows Shift on Windows or Control Space on Mac. But what if I want to tweak the layout of my input language or type in multiple languages with all their special symbols and characters without changing the input source? That's where a programmable keyboard comes in handy. A programmable keyboard allows you to reposition a key code to a different place on your keyboard. For example, the semicolon is barely used in English and is in a premium spot under the right pinky. With a programmable keyboard, you can swap it for the much more used apostrophe. Now, when you press semicolon on your keyboard, it'll send the key code for the apostrophe 34 instead of the key code for the semicolon 33. Como 33? If you're one lucky son of a gun and have a Dygma keyboard, you can use our configurator software, Bazecor, to do just that and much, much more. Bazecor includes multiple languages that you can choose from in the Preferences menu. This visual representation of different input language layouts will help you configure your layout easily. But if your language isn't there, don't worry, you can still customize your keyboard. Remember, we're just moving key codes around. Changing the language only changes how the key codes are displayed, nothing else. Grab the layout of your language and compare it to the English layout. Then choose the equivalent position of the key you want to change and you're good to go. Okay, that's great, but what if I want to use multiple languages? Let's say you type in English, but you frequently use some Spanish characters, such as ñ and the tilde. The easiest solution would be to set your input source to the language with the most symbols. In this case, it would be Spanish.
Buenos dias, Jaime.
Then, you can make layout changes using Bazecor to access the characters you need in both languages easily. For example, you can swap the ñ, which is occasionally used in Spanish, Spanish for the apostrophe, which is heavily used in English, but it's far to reach on a Spanish keyboard. This will cause the brain of anyone trying to use your keyboard to explode. But who wants anybody touching their keyboard anyway? Another method would be to set your most used language as your input source and use alt codes to access the characters unavailable in your selected language. To do this, hold down the Alt key and type the code for that character on your number pad. For example, let's say your input language is English, but you must type this character, the cedilla. To do so, hold down the Alt key and type 135 on your number pad. To make things easier, you can use Bazecor to create macros for these characters. Go to Macro Editor and click on New. Add a name and type the instructions for the macro. In this case, Alt 135. Save and go to the layout editor. Now you can choose a key to place the macro you've just created. And voila! Now, when you press that key, this character will appear. You can find all the different alt codes you'll ever need at alt-codes.net. Unfortunately, they don't work properly with Mac. These codes are helpful when you mainly use one language and occasionally another. However, if you constantly type in multiple languages, you might need a better solution. In that case, you can install US English International as your input language. This input language has many, if not all, special characters which you can easily access by pressing Alt-GR or Alt-Control. Then you can use Bazecor to remap those key combinations to different layers to easily access them without stretching your fingers to reach Alt-GR. This only works for Windows though, unfortunately. On a Mac, the US International layout doesn't have all of these symbols. You could also go on to create your own input source language by using third-party apps like Ukelele, but the easiest option would be installing Eurkey. Eurkey is an input language intended for European programmers and translators that includes all the imaginable symbols for languages based on the Latin alphabet. Just head over to their website and choose the appropriate version that matches your OS and follow the instructions. Conclusion and goodbye! And that's a wrap! When it comes to language layout, understanding the significance of key codes and input languages is crucial. The correct key code in the matrix, combined with your chosen input language, holds the power to unlock any character you desire. I'm trying to free your mind, but I can only show you the door. You're the one that has to walk through it.